The people of Ontario have reason to wonder whether there's really very much left of the unspoiled wilderness they've always regarded as their birthright. A provincial government report has revealed the extent to which mercury pollution is spreading through the province's waterways, contaminating fish to the point where they are unfit for human consumption. Unacceptable levels of mercury have been found in varying species of fish at points in the Ottawa River, the St. Lawrence River, the entire Great Lakes system, and other major bodies of water, all the way up to the far northwestern end of the province. Sport fishermen in the affected area have been advised which species are contaminated and are being told to fish for fun. Such advice is of little help to commercial fishermen and others who have to fish to live, such as the Indians of the Wabigoon River.
If an Indian family has nothing on the table, it's easy enough to go and get fish.
Because I just can't go without it. It's one of my main source of diet.
I've commercial fished in different lakes, and never in my time that I've seen that many whitefish floating on the surface.
Water is no good. Somebody make some pepper, no good.
Somebody else came along and said it shouldn't eat fish at all, to be on the safe side.
Because I think they've been more than amply warned.
And they admit that nobody really knew what they were doing, what was pollution really.
A lot of people say it's been going on for years and years.
Yeah.
And now they finally realize that it's on. Well, you can't do nothing about it. It's on now.
Now this has come to light that folders or things will be sent around to let us know what to look for, because I honestly don't know what to look for.
This is the Wabigoon Falls. About 2 miles downstream, the Wabigoon River joins the English River system, which flows into the Winnipeg River, then into Lake Winnipeg, and up through the Nelson River into the Hudson Bay. You can go about 200 miles south and west of here, same kind of country, 400 or 500 miles up to the Hudson Bay, and that way, well, it's 3,000 miles to Labrador. I used to fish on this spot 15 years ago, and the fish were even more plentiful then than they are now. Things are a little different this year. The signs have gone up that the fish are poisoned. Mercury pollution.
Mercury pollution, as we define it and as the Food and Drug Directorate defines it, is the presence of mercury in fish exceeding 0.5 parts per million. We believe these are chlorine-producing plants. Not all chlorine-producing plants by any extreme, but just the ones using mercury in their processes. And a certain amount of this is definitely being discharged.
The Dryden Pulp and Paper Company and the Dryden Chemical Company Limited dump their effluent into the Wabigoon River at Dryden, and the effects this is having can be felt for hundreds of miles down the watershed. This is the Ojibwe Band, 200 miles downstream from Dryden at White Dog Falls. Here, more than 500 people have been told that the fish on their reserve are poisoned.
For eating purposes, we cannot eat fish now. Secondly, the commercial fishermen are stopped, and also the guiding is stopped. The people are hurt right now.
Chief McLeod of the White Dog Falls Ojibwe Band has been pressing the government for answers. At a meeting of members of his band and the neighboring Grassy Narrows Band, he was successful in persuading the Provincial Minister of Energy and Resources, Mr. George Kerr, to pay him a visit.
It's the first time that a minister comes to our reserve here, and I hope they are not only doing lip service.
Chloralkali plants, chemical plants, they require mercury. But it was a matter of having a process loss. And by proper house cleaning and by proper use of mercury, there's no reason for the loss. And they've minimized that to the extent where it's zero in the plants that we have issued orders against those plants.
This spring, a Winnipeg reporter asked the president of Dryden Chemicals if the dumping of mercury could be stopped by May 1st, as the government had ordered.
We are confident that it can be.
To eliminate it 100%?
It'll be eliminated to a very, very small quantity.
Well, is it to nil or is it to acceptable tolerance levels?
At some point, it'll have to be to an acceptable tolerance level.
As for the sister plant, Dryden Pulp and Paper Company, which shares the same sewer system,
is there any mercury emission at all from the pulp and paper making process?
No, no.
None at all?
And anyway, we use in the pulp and paper mill 30 million gallons a day. And if there is some mercury, by the time it goes out, it's infinitesimal.
For as long as the sun shall shine, for as long as the grass shall grow, for as long as the rivers shall run, the native peoples shall have the right to take their living from the lands reserved to them. So goes the old treaty, still in effect. But can the law help when there's no work and no money coming in to pay for it? The supervisor of Indian Affairs for the Kenora region is Mr. Peter Hare.
Their employment picture has dropped considerably, and as a result, the direct outlay of our department on welfare has increased to a very large degree.
Jackson Hall is manager of the Hudson Bay post at Grassy Narrows.
Now the majority of the people are on welfare. Even 3 years ago, it was very minimal, the amount of welfare being given out.
90% of our people are living on welfare, and just about 10% are working. They used to look down on a guy that was getting welfare. I would say that he wasn't man enough to support his own family. But nowadays they're depending on it because they got nothing else to do, and now they're bragging about having how much money they're getting.
The provincial government is acting like an ostrich and is burying its head in the sand on this whole problem. The provincial government has no policy in effect at the moment as to whether compensation should be paid or not. And they have to decide, they should have decided long ago, just exactly what the ground rules were for compensation to be paid for those people who are affected by this kind of pollution. So far, they have done nothing in any respect.
How long have we waited so far? 100 years before we got answers. We still haven't got answers. And this saying they will be compensated, but when? What do my people do in the meantime?
The minister went on to say himself that all the people should be checked by a doctor.
The drug dispenser for Grassy Narrows, Janet Hall, would also like some answers. Answers about how mercury poisoning acts and whether the people in her care have been affected.
I helped that doctor take the blood samples, etc., and I haven't heard anything. Whether Mrs. White in Kenora, who's the nurse for this area, has the results or not, I don't know.
A provincial doctor came up some months ago, and he went to Grassy and he took blood samples and also samples of hair.
What were the results of those tests?
We don't know, and we never heard about them, and nobody ever said anything about the test.
He told us that he would let us know if there was any positive results. We haven't heard anything.
Haven't heard. You eat fish?
Oh, yes.
Every day?
Not every day,
Well,
but when I want to eat fish, I go get
How
them.
often?
Oh, twice a week.
Yeah. Your kids, too?
Yeah, sure.
Do you know what mercury pollution, what the effects of mercury poisoning are?
No.
30 years is a long time to live next to a poison, and the chief of the Grassy Narrows Reserve would like to know what it's done to his people. The reserve lies near Kenora in northwestern Ontario. It once was the site of a mercury spill. As Jolyn Shane reports, a world expert in mercury poisoning recently did some testing there, and the early results are disturbing.
The Ojibwe people here still fish, but they try to be careful about how many they eat because they know the danger. The fish, especially the walleye, are contaminated with mercury. It's the legacy of an environmental disaster 30 years ago. A paper plant dumped tons of mercury into the river system, a toxin that can't be cleaned up. Steve Fobister used to be a fishing guide here and has eaten a lot of fish over his lifetime.
I've lost half of my strength that I used to have. My speech is going. I can't talk properly. I choke easy. I can't swallow good.
Like many others here, he wonders if he's suffering from mercury poisoning, an issue that's been stirred up again with the arrival of 2 experts from Japan. Mazazumi Harada was part of a research team in the 1970s that traveled to Grassy Narrows. His work revealed widespread mercury poisoning, but even that didn't reveal the full extent. Now he's back, studying the legacy of that disaster. He'll test these hair samples from 60 people.
Some people had a very typical methyl mercury poisoning.
His initial testing already showed 70 to 80% of the adults have some symptoms, including blurry vision and speech, taste, and smell impairments. He also suspects an 8-year-old girl he examined was born with it, decades after the contamination was discovered.
The mother ate mercury, so through the placenta.
His initial results are causing concern in this community. The chief says no one has ever known exactly how many people have been affected, not then and not now.
I would like to see a comprehensive testing of our people, more testing by Health and Welfare Canada, to find out how serious, how widespread this mercury poisoning is.
Health Canada stopped its monitoring of some people years ago, but says it's interested in the Japanese doctors' research.
Eventually it may spawn a whole area of research and other work relevant to that community.
For his part, Steve Fobister is bitter that disasters in urban communities get so much attention, while this seems to be forgotten.
What we're experiencing is environmental racism.
Meantime, people here wonder what the poison has done to them over the years. Jolynn Shane, CBC News, Grassy Narrows, Ontario.
Well, a major funding agreement has been reached between Ottawa and the Grassy Narrows First Nation in Ontario over mercury poisoning. Tens of millions of dollars will be given to care for people suffering from poisoning after mercury was dumped upstream from the community decades ago. Logan Turner has more.
Grassy Narrows First Nation is set to receive a specialized mercury care home nearly 60 years after mercury was first dumped into the English Wabigoon River. It was right here on the powwow grounds of Grassy Narrows First Nation that Indigenous Services Canada Minister Mark Miller announced nearly $69 million to operate the facility. That's in addition to $20 million earlier announced to build the facility. It was in the 1960s and 70s that industrial pollution contaminated the waters, causing the mercury poisoning of fish and later people in the area. It has been estimated that nearly 90% of the First Nation suffers from some sort of symptoms of mercury poisoning, which ranges from numbness of the fingers and toes to seizures and even cognitive delays. Grassy Narrows Chief Randy Fobister called the moment a historic one for the community.
It's a significant milestone. Today's signing, the agreement that's, myself, Mark Miller signed today, along with council. So we're really happy about it.
The care home comes as a result of decades of activism, including blockades, marches, even a former chief leading a hunger strike on the lawn of Parliament Hill. Chrissy Isaacs has been advocating for mercury justice for decades.
I don't want my kids to live this way. I don't want my grandchildren to live this way. And I feel like it took a handful of people, to make that stand. And then everybody, literally came together.
Construction on the facility is expected to begin in spring of 2022 with a possible opening in spring of 2023. But Grassy Narrows says this is just the first step in what they're calling mercury justice. They're calling for compensation to address a wide range of social, cultural, and economic impacts of the mercury poisoning. As well, they're demanding an end to logging and other industrial activities that are taking place in their traditional territory. Logan Turner, CBC News, Grassy Narrows.